The Great Pyramid of Giza stands alone. It is the last of the seven wonders of the ancient world still in existence. For more than 4,500 years, it has watched the desert sands shift and civilizations rise and fall. Its sheer scale is difficult to comprehend. It is made of roughly 2,300,000 stone blocks. Some blocks weigh as much as 80 tons. These massive stones were quarried. They were transported. They were lifted to incredible heights with astonishing precision. The structure is an engineering marvel, aligned almost perfectly to the cardinal points. How did an ancient society, thousands of years before modern machinery, accomplish this? This question has captivated explorers, historians, and the public for centuries. This question is not just about engineering. It's about the people who built the pyramids. Who were they? What motivated them? How did they organize such an immense project? The pyramids weren't just tombs. They were national projects, expressing a culture's power and worldview. They represent a colossal investment of labor, resources, ingenuity. Understanding construction gives us a window into Old Kingdom society. It tells us about their government, their economy, their religion, their capacity for collective action. The quest to understand construction is a quest to understand the ancient Egyptians. The search for answers has been a long, winding road. Early travelers like Herodotus recorded stories from priests and guides. Those accounts mixed fact and folklore. In the 19th and 20th centuries, explorers began systematic archaeology. They mapped the Giza Plateau. They excavated tombs and temples. They started to piece together the puzzle. Yet many questions remain. With no single definitive blueprint, we reconstruct methods from clues they left. This essay will guide you through the process of discovery. We'll look at the evidence directly. Tool marks on stones, remains of workers' settlements, ancient documents that survived millennia. We'll explore major theories, from simple ramps to more complex systems. Our goal isn't to present one absolute answer. It's to show the evidence that exists, to empower you to evaluate the claims yourself. We'll climb a ladder of evidence, step by step, toward the truth. When many people think of pyramid construction, a single powerful image often comes to mind. It is an image of thousands upon thousands of slaves, toiling under the hot sun. They are whipped by cruel overseers as they drag massive stone blocks up a giant ramp. This picture has been cemented in our collective imagination by Hollywood films and popular novels. It is a dramatic and compelling story, full of suffering and oppression. For a long time, this was the accepted narrative. It seemed to make sense, given the sheer scale of the work involved. Who but a massive enslaved population could be forced to undertake such a monumental and thankless task? This story, however, begins to crumble under the weight of archaeological evidence. There are many problems with the slave labor theory. First, the logistics of managing a huge, unwilling, unskilled workforce would be a nightmare. Building the pyramids required immense skill, precision, and coordination. It was not simply a matter of brute force. The workers needed to be organized, fed, housed, and cared for. An army of slaves would have been difficult to control and would have required a massive security force. More importantly, the archaeological discoveries at Giza tell a very different story. Archaeologists have uncovered the town where the pyramid workers lived. It is not a slave camp. It is a well-organized settlement with bakeries, breweries, and facilities for processing fish. The workers were fed well, receiving daily rations of bread, beer, and meat. We have also found their cemeteries. The skeletons of these workers show they lived hard lives. They suffered from injuries like broken bones and strained backs, which are consistent with heavy construction work. But their bones also show signs of healing. This means they received medical care. Most tellingly, they were buried with honor near the pyramids they helped build, a privilege that would never be granted to mere slaves. So where did the slave myth come from? It appears to have its roots in ancient Greek accounts, particularly from the historian Herodotus. He visited Egypt in the 5th century BCE, 2,000 years after the Great Pyramid was built. He wrote down the stories he was told by local guides. These stories spoke of 100,000 men working in 3-month shifts. That narrative easily morphed into the idea of slave labor. This popular misconception, repeated for centuries, shows why it's important to separate later stories from the direct physical evidence. The real story of the pyramid builders is far more interesting than the myth. It is a story of a skilled, dedicated, and well-organized workforce. To navigate the confusing landscape of theories and claims, we need a clear framework. We will use a concept called the myth versus evidence ladder. Think of it as a way to organize information. At the very bottom of the ladder are the wildest myths. These are ideas with no supporting evidence at all, such as the notion that aliens built the pyramids. These claims are fascinating, but they do not stand up to scientific scrutiny. They often ignore the vast amount of archaeological context we have. As we climb the ladder, the theories become more plausible. They start to incorporate some pieces of real evidence, but they may still have significant gaps or contradictions. The middle rungs of our ladder are occupied by theories that are actively debated by experts. These are serious hypotheses that attempt to explain specific aspects of construction. For example, one theory might propose a single, long, straight ramp, while another might suggest a ramp that spirals around the outside of the pyramid. Both ideas have pros and cons. They might explain one part of the process well, but fail to account for another. This is where the hard work of archaeology and engineering analysis comes in. We must test each idea against all the available evidence to see how well it holds up. We weigh the strengths and weaknesses of each competing hypothesis. As we approach the top of the ladder, we find the theories that are most strongly supported by a wide range of evidence. These are the ideas that align with archaeological finds, ancient texts, and modern scientific testing. For instance, the discovery of a worker's diary, the Papyrus of Merer, provides direct, first-hand accounts of transporting limestone blocks. The analysis of tool marks on quarry walls tells us what kind of tools they used. Experimental archaeology, where researchers try to replicate ancient techniques, shows us what is physically possible. A strong theory is one that can connect all these different types of evidence into a coherent and logical narrative. It is important to understand that even the top rungs are not a final, complete answer. Our understanding is always evolving as new discoveries are made. The evidence ladder is not a rigid structure. It is a dynamic tool. New finds can cause us to reevaluate old ideas, moving a theory up or down the ladder. The goal is to get as high up the ladder as we can, to the explanation that is best supported by the facts as we currently know them. This evidence-based approach allows us to move beyond speculation and get closer to the historical reality of how the pyramids were built. It is a slow, careful process of piecing together a giant historical puzzle. In this essay, we will embark on a systematic investigation. We will follow a clear path, starting with the earliest sources and moving toward the latest scientific discoveries. Our journey begins by looking at what the ancient Egyptians themselves said. We will examine inscriptions found in tombs and temples, as well as the few administrative documents that have survived. These records provide crucial context, but they are often incomplete. They were not meant to be construction manuals. We will then look at what later writers, like the Greeks and Romans, had to say. This will help us understand how myths and legends about the pyramids began to form even in antiquity. Next, we will climb the evidence ladder and examine the major construction theories one by one. Our first major topic will be the workforce. We will present the evidence that has dismantled the old slave labor myth and replaced it with a picture of a skilled, paid, and respected labor force. We will look at their village, their diet, their medical care, and their burials. After establishing who built the pyramids, we will turn to the question of how. This is where we will analyze the different ramp theories. Was it a single, massive straight ramp? A series of smaller zigzag ramps? Or perhaps a ramp that spiraled up the pyramid's exterior or even its interior? For each theory, we will present the evidence for and against it. This will involve looking at the physical remains on the Giza Plateau itself. We will examine the quarries to see how the stones were cut and shaped. We will look at the tools that have been found, such as copper chisels and wooden mallets. We will also discuss the logistics of the entire operation. How were millions of tons of stone transported from quarries miles away? We will look at evidence for sleds, ropes, and the possible use of water to reduce friction. This section will dive deep into the practical, on-the-ground challenges the builders faced and how they likely overcame them. Finally, we will bring our investigation into the 21st century. We will look at the results from experimental archaeology, where teams have tried to replicate ancient building techniques using authentic tools and materials. We will also consider modern engineering analyses and digital simulations that help us test the feasibility of different ramp designs. New technologies, like cosmic ray muon scanning, are even allowing us to peer inside the pyramid without moving a single stone. By the end of our journey, you will have a comprehensive understanding of the evidence. You will be able to see which theories stand on solid ground and where questions still remain, waiting for the next generation of archaeologists to uncover the answers. Whispers from the past. Herodotus and the classical accounts. Our journey into the past begins not in Egypt, but in ancient Greece. The Greek historian Herodotus, often called the father of history, visited Egypt around 450 BCE. This was a full 2 millennia after the Great Pyramid of Giza was completed. The monument was already ancient to him. In his work, The Histories, he recorded what he was told by local priests and guides. According to his sources, the Great Pyramid was built by King Khufu, whom Herodotus calls Cheops. He wrote that the project took 20 years and employed 100,000 men who worked in 3-month shifts. He described a system of machines, possibly levers made of short timbers, used to lift the stones from one level to the next. Herodotus's account is invaluable because it is one of the earliest written descriptions of the pyramids we have. However, it is not a primary source. He was reporting stories that had been passed down orally for 2,000 years. It is easy to see how facts could become distorted or embellished over such a vast stretch of time. The figure of 100,000 men, for example, is now considered by most Egyptologists to be a significant exaggeration. Housing and feeding such a massive workforce at Giza would have been a logistical impossibility. Nevertheless, his narrative of immense labor and long-term organization planted the seeds of the popular imagination, contributing heavily to the later myth of a massive, oppressed workforce. Other classical writers also commented on the pyramids. Diodorus Siculus, a Greek historian writing in the 1st century BCE, largely repeated Herodotus's account, but added his own details. He claimed that no trace of the ramps remained because they were removed after construction, a convenient explanation for their absence. The Roman scholar Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century CE, marveled at the pyramids but offered a more cynical view. He called them a vain and foolish ostentation of royal wealth, suggesting the kings built them to keep the populace busy and prevent them from plotting rebellion. These classical accounts shaped Western perceptions of the pyramids for centuries. While filled with folklore and potential inaccuracies, they provide historical anchors. They confirm the identity of the pharaohs associated with the Great Pyramids, like Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure. They also introduce the first technical theories, such as the use of levers and earthen ramps. These early accounts created a powerful, enduring narrative. Modern archaeology has since been a long process of testing these ancient claims against the hard, physical evidence left buried in the sand. The tomb tells a tale, Egyptian inscriptions and reliefs. To get closer to the truth, we must turn from Greek visitors to the ancient Egyptians themselves. While no single papyrus scroll detailing the master plan for building a pyramid has ever been found, the Egyptians did leave behind a wealth of information carved into the walls of their tombs and temples. These reliefs and inscriptions were not intended as construction manuals. Their primary purpose was religious and commemorative. They were designed to ensure the deceased's successful journey into the afterlife and to document their achievements. However, these scenes of daily life and official duties inadvertently provide us with priceless clues about their society's capabilities and organization. In the tombs of high officials from the Old Kingdom, we find detailed scenes of various activities. We see farmers tending crops, herdsmen managing livestock, craftsmen building furniture, and craftsmen making pottery. More importantly, we see depictions of large-scale projects. For example, in the 5th dynasty tomb of an official named Tai at Saqqara, there are reliefs showing men building boats. These scenes illustrate a high degree of labor specialization and organization. We also see scenes of large statues being transported. A famous relief from the later Middle Kingdom tomb of Jehuti-Hotep shows a colossal statue of the official being pulled on a wooden sledge by 172 men, with one man pouring liquid in front of the sledge to reduce friction. These depictions are crucial for several reasons. First, they show that the Egyptians were masters of logistics and labor management long before and after the Giza pyramids were built. They understood how to move extremely heavy objects using simple but effective technology, sledges, ropes, and manpower. The scene in Jehuti-Hotep's tomb provides direct visual evidence for the use of liquid lubrication, a technique whose effectiveness has been confirmed by modern experiments. These reliefs prove that the fundamental concepts needed for pyramid construction, quarrying, transport, and teamwork, were well-established parts of Egyptian technological know-how. Furthermore, inscriptions give us insight into the administrative structure that made such projects possible. We find titles for officials like Overseer of all works of the king. This indicates a clear chain of command and a bureaucratic system capable of managing massive state-sponsored projects. While these reliefs and titles do not show us a pyramid being built block by block, they paint a picture of a society that was perfectly equipped for the task. They had the organizational skills, the technical knowledge, and the manpower. These Egyptian sources, though indirect, provide a powerful counter-narrative to the idea that the pyramids were built by some mysterious, unknown means. They show us a capable, ingenious, and highly organized people. The Dawn of Egyptology, Napoleon's Scholars, and the Rosetta Stone. The modern scientific study of ancient Egypt began with a military campaign. In 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Egypt. Along with his army, he brought a corps of 167 scholars, scientists, and artists. This group, known as the Commission des Sciences et des Arts, had a mission to conduct a comprehensive survey of Egypt, from its ancient monuments to its modern flora and fauna. While the French military campaign was ultimately a failure, this scientific expedition was a spectacular success. The scholars meticulously documented everything they saw, creating detailed drawings and maps of temples, tombs, and, of course, the pyramids at Giza. The work of Napoleon's savants was published in a monumental multi-volume series called the Description de l'Égypte. This publication was a landmark. For the first time, Europeans had access to accurate and systematic depictions of ancient Egyptian monuments, rather than the fanciful drawings of earlier travelers. The detailed architectural plans and artistic renderings sparked a wave of intense interest in ancient Egypt across Europe. Egyptomania. The description laid the groundwork for a new academic discipline, Egyptology. However, a huge barrier remained. No one could read the ancient Egyptian writing. The walls of the monuments were covered in hieroglyphs, but their meaning had been lost for over 1,000 years. The key to unlocking this ancient language was discovered by accident in 1799. A French soldier named Pierre-François Bouchard, working on fortifications in the town of Rashid, which the Europeans called Rosetta, found a dark stone slab. This stone, which became world famous as the Rosetta Stone, was inscribed with the same decree in 3 different scripts: Ancient Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphs. It was immediately recognized as a potential key. The race to decipher the hieroglyphs began. It was a young French scholar, Jean-François Champollion, who ultimately cracked the code. By comparing the Greek text with the hieroglyphs and realizing that the script was a complex mix of phonetic and ideographic signs, he was able to translate the ancient language. His breakthrough, announced in 1822, was the single most important event in the history of Egyptology. It meant that archaeologists were no longer just looking at mute stones. They could now read the words of the ancient Egyptians themselves. This new ability transformed the study of the pyramids from mere architectural analysis to a true historical investigation, allowing scholars to read the names of kings and officials directly from the monuments. Section 4. Mapping the Sacred Ground. The first surveys of Giza, with the ability to read hieroglyphs and a growing public fascination, the 19th century became the great age of exploration and excavation in Egypt. The Giza Plateau, with its 3 iconic pyramids and the enigmatic Sphinx. Early explorers and proto-archaeologists flocked to the site, but their methods were often crude by modern standards. Many were essentially treasure hunters, using dynamite and brute force to search for hidden chambers and royal riches. One of the first to attempt a more scientific approach was the Italian strongman and explorer Giovanni Belzoni, who in 1818 managed to find the original entrance to Khafra's pyramid, which had been sealed for centuries. A far more systematic and scientific survey was conducted by the British engineer John Shea Perring in the late 1830s. Working with Colonel Howard Vyse, Perring undertook the first truly accurate architectural survey of the Giza pyramids. He meticulously measured their dimensions, angles, and orientation. He used drilling and gunpowder to force his way into the pyramids in search of new chambers, a destructive method that would be unthinkable today. Despite his aggressive techniques, Perring's work produced incredibly precise maps and cross-sections of the pyramid's internal passage systems. His measurements confirmed the astonishing precision of the ancient builders and provided baseline data that is still used by researchers today. One of Vyse and Perring's most significant discoveries came in 1837. Above the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid, they found a series of 5 small, previously unknown compartments, now called the relieving chambers. These chambers were never intended to be entered. Their purpose was purely structural, designed to relieve the weight of the masonry above the flat roof of the king's chamber. On the walls of these rough, unfinished rooms, the explorers found quarry marks and graffiti left by the ancient work gangs. These markings included the name of the pharaoh, Khufu, enclosed in a cartouche. This was the first definitive, contemporary proof linking the Great Pyramid to its famous king. Following these early British and Italian efforts, the German expedition led by Carl Richard Lepsius in the 1840s conducted another massive survey of Egyptian monuments, including Giza. Lepsius's team created the Lepsius List of Pyramids, a catalog of 67 ancient pyramids. These pioneering surveys of the 19th century were foundational. They moved the study of the pyramids from speculation to measurement. They produced the first accurate maps, confirmed the identities of the builders, and began to reveal the complexity of the structures. While their methods were often destructive, they laid the essential groundwork for all future archaeological work on the plateau, defining the questions that would dominate research for the next century. Section 5. Digging for people. Not just treasure, the workers' village. For much of the 19th and early 20th centuries, archaeological work at Giza focused on the pyramids themselves and the tombs of royalty and high officials. The common people, including the thousands of workers who must have built these monuments, remained invisible. This began to change dramatically in the late 1980s. A team led by myself, Mark Lenner, along with Egyptian archaeologist Zahi Hawass, began a systematic excavation south of the Giza pyramids. Here, we uncovered the lost city of the pyramid builders. This discovery fundamentally changed our understanding of who built the pyramids and how they lived. What we found was not a temporary camp for slaves. It was a highly organized and permanent settlement. The site, which we call Hayt el Ghurab, the Wall of the Crow, includes large, long galleries that appear to be barracks for the rotating labor force. These structures could have housed between 1,600 and 2,000 workers at a time. Nearby, we found the administrative center of the project: houses for the scribes, houses for the artisans, houses for the overseers. The entire complex was carefully planned, indicating a high level of state control and logistical foresight. It was a city built to support a massive, long-term national project. The most compelling evidence for the workers' status came from the vast quantities of animal bones found at the site. Analysis of these remains, conducted by archaeozoologist Richard Redding, showed that the workers were eating enormous amounts of beef, mutton, and goat. Beef, in particular, was a luxury in ancient Egypt. The fact that the pyramid builders were supplied with prime cuts of meat on a regular basis is a powerful indicator that they were not slaves. Instead, they were valued state employees, whose physical strength was essential to the project. We also unearthed massive bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves of bread daily, and evidence of breweries providing the workers with their staple rations of bread and beer. Further evidence came from the discovery of the workers' cemeteries, located on a slope just west of the settlement. The tombs were modest mud brick structures, but the burials were respectful. The workers were buried with pottery and with other goods for the afterlife. Crucially, their skeletons tell a story of their lives. Forensic analysis shows that men worked on the project, and that women worked on the project. Their bones reveal evidence of hard labor, including arthritis, and fused vertebrae. However, they also show signs of healed fractures, indicating that they received medical care. Being buried with honor near the sacred pyramids of their kings was a privilege that would never have been afforded to slaves. These discoveries provided the first concrete evidence that the pyramids were built by a skilled workforce, a well-fed workforce, and a respected Egyptian workforce. Section 6. The Quarry's Scars. First clues to ancient tools. Close up. Quarry wall with tool scars and grooves. To understand how the pyramids were built, we must understand how stone was obtained. Core blocks, relatively soft limestone quarried on the Giza Plateau, just south of Khafra. Casing stones, fine white limestone from Tura across the Nile. Granite beams for internal chambers came from Aswan, over 500 miles to the south. Each quarry site holds clues to ancient techniques. Early archaeology revealed how they extracted massive blocks. They did not use dynamite or advanced machinery. Instead, they used simple tools and a deep understanding of geology. In the limestone quarries at Giza and Tura, workers first cleared loose sand and poor surface rock. Then they cut a series of deep, narrow trenches into the bedrock. The result? A large block isolated on three sides. We can still see the marks left by their tools in the quarry walls. Hard stone pounders, likely dolerite, left repeated impact marks. Copper chisels were used for finer shaping. Copper saws helped cut the softer stone. Granite at Aswan required different methods. Granite is much harder than limestone. Copper tools would have been useless against granite. Instead, they used heavy dolerite pounders, some weighing up to 12 pounds, to bash trenches. Another technique: cut small slots into the granite. Insert wooden wedges into those slots. Then soak the wedges with water. As the wood absorbed water and expanded, it cracked the granite along the line. This allowed them to split off enormous blocks with remarkable control. The quarries are littered with evidence of this process. The most famous example, the unfinished obelisk at Aswan, still attached to the bedrock. It would have weighed nearly 1,200 tons and was abandoned after a flaw was found. We can see the pounder marks all around it. These observations demonstrated the Egyptians could cut and shape even the hardest stones with available tools. The scars of the rock are the evidence. There was no need to invoke mysterious lost technologies. For decades, our understanding of pyramid construction was based on indirect evidence: tomb scenes, archaeological remains, and the monuments themselves. We had no first-hand written accounts from the time of the great pyramid builders at Giza. This all changed in 2013, with a discovery many call one of the most important in modern Egyptology. An archaeological team led by Pierre Talley and Gregory Marouard, excavating at a remote ancient harbor site on the Red Sea coast, called Wadi al-Jarf, found a collection of papyrus fragments. These turned out to be the oldest papyri ever discovered in Egypt. The documents were a logbook, a journal kept by an official named Merer, who lived during the 26th year of the reign of King Khufu. Merer led a team of about 40 elite workmen. His logbook, written in hieratic script, a cursive form of hieroglyphs, meticulously details the daily activities of his crew over several months. It's not a grand state proclamation, but a simple administrative record, a kind of ancient spreadsheet. And that is precisely what makes it revolutionary. It provides an unprecedented ground-level view of the organization and logistics behind the Great Pyramid. Merer's diary records his team's main job: transport high-quality white limestone blocks from the quarries at Tura to the Giza Plateau. He describes the massive stones being loaded onto wooden boats at Tura. His crew navigated the boats down the Nile River, through a system of canals, to an inland harbor at the foot of the Giza Plateau. The logbook records the journey time, typically 2 to 3 days for a round trip. He names the official they reported to at Giza, Ankaf, Khufu's half-brother, vizier, and overseer of all the king's works. The papyrus of Merer is a game-changer. It provides direct written confirmation for things archaeologists long suspected. It proves large blocks were transported by water, using a network of canals, bringing them as close as possible to the construction site. It confirms Tura as the source of the casing stones. It even gives us the name and title of the man in charge of the Giza project, Ankaf, whose large tomb sits in the Eastern Cemetery at Giza. Most importantly, it gives us a human voice from the age of the pyramids. The voice of a middle manager, a capable, literate man proud to serve his king. It paints a picture not of slaves, but of a highly efficient, well-organized, and mobile state workforce. It is, an extraordinary window into the past. The oldest and most persistent theory about the pyramid builders is that they were slaves. This idea, originating with Herodotus and popularized by Hollywood, paints a picture of a massive, oppressed population forced into labor. For centuries, this narrative seemed to provide a simple answer. The theory posits that Egyptian pharaohs used their absolute power to enslave hundreds of thousands of people, perhaps captured in foreign wars or from within their own populace, and drove them with whips to complete these colossal monuments. It is a story of human suffering on an epic scale. However, as we climb the first rungs of our evidence ladder in the previous act, this theory began to show serious cracks. The archaeological evidence from Giza directly contradicts the slave labor hypothesis. The discovery of the workers' village, with its organized barracks, bakeries, and administrative buildings, points toward a well-cared-for workforce, not a slave camp. The analysis of animal bones shows they received a protein-rich diet, including prime cuts of beef, a luxury that would not be wasted on an expendable labor force. The workers' cemetery shows they were buried with honor near the pyramids, their bones showing signs of medical treatment for their injuries. These are not the conditions of slavery. The modern evidence-based consensus among Egyptologists is that the pyramids were built by a dedicated workforce of skilled Egyptians. This workforce was likely composed of two main groups. The first was a permanent cadre of highly skilled artisans, architects, and overseers who lived at Giza year-round. These were the project managers, the stone masons, and the engineers who planned and supervised the construction. The second group was a much larger rotating labor force, likely consisting of around 20,000 men at any given time. These workers were likely conscripted citizens, serving the state for a period of a few months as a form of national service or taxation, known as a corvée. This model of a skilled conscripted workforce makes far more logistical and social sense. These workers were not unwilling slaves, but participants in a national project of immense religious and cultural importance. They were housed, fed, and cared for by the state. This system provided a steady supply of labor while also integrating the broader Egyptian population into the central project of the kingdom. It fostered a sense of national identity and shared purpose. The graffiti left by work gangs inside the pyramids, with names like Drunkards of Menkaure and Friends of Khufu gang, speaks not of slaves, but of proud teams of men who took pride in their difficult work. Once we establish who built the pyramids, the next logical question is how they lifted millions of heavy blocks to such great heights. The most intuitive and widely depicted theory is the single, massive, straight ramp. The idea is simple. As the pyramid grew taller, a long ramp was built against one face, made of earth, rubble, and mud brick. Teams of workers would drag the stone blocks, loaded onto wooden sledges, up this gentle incline. For every new layer, the ramp had to be extended in length and in height to keep a manageable slope. Proponents call it the most straightforward engineering solution. It needs no special tech, just vast amounts of labor, mud, and stone. The concept matches visual evidence like the Jehutihotep relief. Egyptians used ramps and sledges. A long straight ramp gives a wide, stable roadway and allows multiple teams to work simultaneously, hauling blocks and hauling supplies to the rising platform. The ramp would be a temporary mountain. At the end, it would be dismantled, its materials repurposed or simply spread across the plateau. That explains why no massive ramp remains at Giza today. For years, the straight ramp was the default theory in schools and documentaries. It's easy to visualize and seems to require the least complex engineering. It casts pyramid building as a problem of logistics, manpower, and a testament to Old Kingdom organization. Section 3. The problem of scale. Why the straight ramp fails. While the single straight ramp theory is appealing in its simplicity, it encounters significant problems when subjected to rigorous analysis. The primary issue is one of immense scale and geometry. To reach the top of the Great Pyramid, which stands at 146.6 meters, 481 feet, and keep a workable slope of around 8%, a simple calculation shows the ramp would need to be about 1.8 kilometers, over a mile, long. The sheer volume of material required would be staggering, potentially greater than the pyramid's own volume. Building and then dismantling that ramp would be almost as big a project as building the pyramid itself. This creates a major logistical problem. Where would all that material have come from? The Giza Plateau is a solid rock shelf. There isn't enough loose earth nearby. They would have had to quarry and transport millions of cubic meters just for the temporary ramp, drastically increasing workload and resources. This makes the straight ramp theory highly inefficient. Furthermore, accessing the pyramid's upper levels poses a practical problem. As the ramp lengthened to reach higher courses, each block's journey became incredibly long. A block for the top would have to be dragged for over a mile. That would dramatically slow down construction. To finish the pyramid in Khufu's 27-year reign, a block had to be placed every 2 to 3 minutes during a 10-hour workday. Long travel times on a single ramp make that rate nearly impossible, especially for the upper third of the monument. The final and most damning argument is the lack of archaeological evidence. A mile-long, hundreds of feet high structure, even if dismantled, should leave traces. Its foundation would have leveled and scarred the bedrock. Yet extensive surveys of Giza show no evidence of such a ramp. The surrounding landscape does not support a mile-long ramp. Because of these overwhelming logistical, efficiency, and archaeological problems, most modern Egyptologists have abandoned the single massive straight ramp as the sole method of construction. Section 4. A winding path. The zigzag and spiral ramp theories. The single straight ramp faces insurmountable problems. Egyptologists explored alternative ramp configurations. One idea, a ramp wrapping around the exterior. Two main forms, a zigzag ramp and a spiral ramp. Both approaches solve the straight ramp's primary issue. They avoid an ever-increasing length and massive material volume. The spiral ramp theory proposes a relatively narrow roadway built on the steps of the core. As each layer of core was completed, the ramp would be extended upwards, hugging the profile. This keeps the ramp's length and volume manageable. A similar idea is the zigzag or switchback ramp, back and forth up one face like a mountain road. That keeps the ramp to a much smaller footprint. But the sharp corners would be difficult to navigate with a long, heavy sledge. Imagine maneuvering an 80-ton granite beam around a tight 180-degree turn. Proponents suggest turntables or clever corner mechanisms. But there is no direct archaeological evidence for such devices. Both the spiral and zigzag theories are more economical in terms of materials and labor. However, they also have drawbacks. A key problem: external ramps would cover the pyramid faces during construction. That would make it incredibly difficult for surveyors to maintain the pyramid's precise geometry and angles. How could they check the lines of the four corners if obscured by a massive ramp? This objection led some researchers to look for the solution inside the pyramid. Section 5. Evidence for external ramps. Traces on the ground. While grand theories about massive straight ramps lack evidence, there is archaeological proof that the Egyptians did use smaller, more localized ramps for construction. At Giza, the remains of what appear to be supply ramps have been found. South of the Great Pyramid, there are remnants of a construction ramp used to bring materials up onto the main Giza plateau from the harbor area below. This proves that the basic concept of using ramps to haul materials was part of the Giza construction plan. More compelling evidence has been found at other pyramid sites. The unfinished 4th Dynasty Pyramid of Sekhemkhet at Saqqara has clear traces of its construction causeway and side ramps. Even more significantly, at the Meidum Pyramid, which was started in the 3rd Dynasty and completed under Sneferu, Khufu's father, archaeologists have found the remains of what appear to be small construction ramps built against the core masonry. These suggest that smaller, steeper ramps were used to get blocks onto the first few levels of the structure. This supports a hybrid model, where a larger main ramp brings material to the base and smaller ramps are used on the structure itself. The most dramatic evidence for an ancient ramp system was discovered not at a pyramid site, but in a quarry. In 2018, at a calcite quarry at Hatnub, a site used during Khufu's reign, archaeologists uncovered a remarkable discovery: a well-preserved ramp used for hauling stone blocks. This ramp is different from any previously found. It is very steep, but it is flanked on both sides by staircases dotted with post holes. The researchers believe this system allowed workers to use ropes and posts in a pulley-like system to help haul heavy sledges up the steep incline. This demonstrates a level of sophistication in ramp technology that was previously unknown. While the Hatnub quarry ramp was not used to build a pyramid, its discovery is revolutionary. It proves that by the time of Khufu, the Egyptians were using advanced mechanical principles in conjunction with simple ramps to move heavy stones up very steep slopes. This opens up new possibilities for how they might have tackled the pyramids. A shorter, steeper external ramp, perhaps combined with a system of posts and ropes like the one at Hatnub, might have been used for the lower and middle sections of the pyramid. This hard evidence of advanced ramp technology makes the external ramp theories, in some form, much more credible. Section 6. Looking inward, the internal ramp hypothesis. The problems associated with external ramps, obscuring the pyramid's faces and preventing accurate surveying, led researchers to a radical new idea. What if the main ramp was not on the outside, but on the inside? Jean-Pierre Houdin proposed this: a short, external straight ramp for the bottom third. That bottom third would account for about 70% of the pyramid's volume and could be built quickly without a huge ramp. At about 45 to 60 meters high, builders switched method. They built a ramp inside the pyramid's outer edge, about 10 to 15 meters from the face. The ramp spiraled upwards in a long, square-cornered tunnel. It stayed open at the corners, creating small notches on the edges. Open corners allowed crews to turn blocks and provided light and air. This theory has several compelling advantages. First, it keeps the faces clear for surveying. Second, it's extremely efficient. The ramp is built from the same core blocks. No separate ramp to dismantle. The internal ramp would be sealed and left in place, explaining why we see no trace of it today. Houdin used advanced 3D modeling to show feasibility. He links the internal ramp to puzzles like the Grand Gallery, possibly as a channel for a counterweight system. A counterweight system could haul granite beams up to the king's chamber. The theory ties many loose ends together. But is there any physical evidence? Well, that's the big question. Section 7. New scans, new ideas, muon radiography, internal structures. Jean-Pierre Houdin's internal ramp theory is elegant, but to move up the evidence ladder, it needs more than a plausible 3D model. It needs physical proof. For decades, the only way to search inside was destructive drilling or excavation. However, recent advances in physics and technology have provided a new, non-invasive way to peer inside. This technique is called muon radiography, or simply muon scanning. It works by tracking the paths of tiny subatomic particles called muons. They are created when cosmic rays hit the Earth's atmosphere. Muons rain down on the Earth's surface constantly. They can pass through hundreds of meters of stone, but their trajectories are slightly deflected and some are absorbed depending on material density. By placing highly sensitive detectors inside or around a pyramid, scientists can measure the number of muons arriving from different directions. If there's a void or a less dense area, like a hidden chamber or a ramp filled with rubble, more muons will pass through from that direction. By collecting data over many months, scientists can build a 3D map of density variations inside the structure. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project announced a major discovery. They detected a large, previously unknown void inside the Great Pyramid, directly above the Grand Gallery. The void was named the Scan Pyramids Big Void. It's at least 30 meters long and has a cross-section similar to the Grand Gallery. The discovery was a stunning confirmation of the power of muon scanning. It proved there are still major structural secrets hidden within the Great Pyramid. The function of this void is still unknown. It could be a single large chamber. It could be a series of smaller ones. Or it could be a sloped corridor. The discovery has electrified the debate about construction theories. Proponents of the internal ramp, like Houdin, suggest the big void could be part of the internal ramp system, perhaps a horizontal section used for moving blocks. Other researchers are more cautious, suggesting it might be a structural feature to relieve weight, similar to the relieving chambers above the king's chamber. The Scan Pyramids team also detected a smaller void behind the north face, the north face corridor. Further research is needed to determine the precise nature and function of these voids. Muon scanning has not yet provided definitive proof of an internal ramp, but it has opened an exciting new frontier in pyramid research. It's pretty thrilling. Our journey up the evidence ladder has taken us from the fanciful myths of aliens and slaves to the hard, tangible facts written in stone, papyrus, and bone. We can now answer the central question with a high degree of confidence, even if some details remain debated. The pyramids were not built by extraterrestrials or a lost super-civilization, but by the ancient Egyptians themselves. They were not built by a mass of oppressed slaves, but by a well-organized and respected national workforce of skilled artisans and conscripted laborers. These workers were housed in a purpose-built city, fed a protein-rich diet, and given medical care and honorable burials. The evidence for this is overwhelming. Found in the workers' village, their cemeteries and administrative records like the papyrus of Merer. The construction methods, while still a subject of active research, are no longer a complete mystery. The evidence points to a hybrid solution, a combination of brilliant, low-tech techniques applied on a massive scale. We know the builders used sledges to transport blocks over land, their efficiency doubled by the simple but ingenious trick of wetting the sand. We know they used boats and canals to bring stone from distant quarries right to the foot of the Giza Plateau. For lifting, the debate between external and internal ramps continues, but the evidence for ramp building is undeniable. The Hatnub discovery proves the Egyptians used sophisticated steep ramps with mechanical aids, while new scanning technologies hint at hidden structures like the Big Void, which may yet prove to be part of an internal ramp system. Levers and possibly counterweights were almost certainly used for the final, precise placement of blocks. While we have a clear picture, many questions remain open, paving the way for future research. The exact configuration of the primary ramp system used for the Great Pyramid is still the biggest puzzle. Was it a wraparound spiral, a zigzag ramp, or Houdin's internal ramp? Continued muon scanning and other non-invasive technologies offer the best hope of answering this. The function of the Big Void is another pressing question that future scans may clarify. Archaeologists also hope to find more administrative texts like Merer's diary, which could provide further details on labor organization and project timelines. Continued excavation at the workers' city and its harbor could also reveal more about the supply chain and daily life of the thousands who toiled at Giza. In conclusion, the Great Pyramid is not a monument to mystery, but a testament to human potential. It represents the pinnacle of a very human process of development, building on generations of trial and error in tomb construction. The solution to how it was built lies not in fantasy, but in a deep appreciation for organizational genius, engineering skill, and sheer perseverance of the Old Kingdom Egyptians. They possessed a complete and effective toolkit, a sophisticated understanding of logistics, and the ability to mobilize and manage a massive national workforce for a common purpose. The pyramids stand as an enduring monument to what human beings can achieve when they are organized, motivated, and ingenious. The quest to understand them is a quest to understand the very roots of our own collective capability.